There's a quiet kind of exhaustion that doesn't come from physical work. It comes from thinking too much, too often, about everything. If you've ever replayed a conversation long after it ended, questioned a simple decision for hours, or imagined dozens of possible outcomes before taking a single step, then you already understand what overthinking feels like. It's not just thinking deeply. It's a mental loop that refuses to switch off. People who overthink everything often don't start that way. This pattern usually develops slowly, shaped by experiences that taught them one thing: mistakes are dangerous. Maybe they grew up in an environment where criticism was constant, or even small errors led to embarrassment or punishment. Or perhaps they went through situations where things went wrong unexpectedly, leaving them feeling out of control. Over time, the brain adapts. It tries to protect itself by predicting every possible outcome, by analyzing every detail, by preparing for the worst before it happens. At first, this feels useful. Thinking things through can prevent bad decisions. It creates a sense of control. But the line between careful thinking and overthinking is thin, and once crossed, it turns into something else entirely. Instead of helping, it begins to trap. Overthinking isn't just about thinking more, it's about thinking without resolution. The mind doesn't arrive at answers, it circles around questions. What if I said something wrong? What if they misunderstood me? What if I fail? Each thought leads to another, forming a chain that loops back on itself. There's no endpoint, no relief. Just more thinking. This is because overthinking is deeply tied to anxiety. The brain perceives uncertainty as a threat, even when there's no real danger. So it tries to eliminate that uncertainty by analyzing everything. But here's the paradox: the more it analyzes, the more possibilities it creates, and the more uncertain everything becomes. In daily life, this shows up in subtle but powerful ways. Simple decisions become overwhelming. Choosing what to say in a message, what to wear, or even what to eat can turn into a mental debate. Not because the decision itself is important, but because the mind attaches meaning to it. What does this say about me? Will this make me look a certain way? What if I regret this later? And then there are relationships. Overthinking has a particularly strong grip here. A delayed reply becomes a sign of disinterest. A short message feels like hidden frustration. A change in tone sparks a flood of interpretations. People who overthink don't just experience what's happening, they interpret it, dissect it, and often magnify it. This isn't because they're overly dramatic. It's because they care deeply. They want to understand, to connect, to avoid conflict. But in trying so hard to read between the lines, they often end up creating meanings that weren't there in the first place. The mind fills in gaps with assumptions, and those assumptions are rarely kind. Another layer of overthinking is perfectionism. Many overthinkers hold themselves to extremely high standards, often without realizing it. They believe that if they think long enough, plan carefully enough, and analyze every angle, they can get things just right. But perfection is an impossible target. So instead of feeling prepared, they feel stuck. They delay decisions. They hesitate to act. They wait until they feel ready, a feeling that rarely comes. And this leads to frustration, because deep down, they know they're capable. But their own mind becomes the obstacle. There's also a strong connection between overthinking and self-doubt. When you constantly question your thoughts, your choices, and your actions, you begin to lose trust in yourself. You rely more on analysis and less on intuition. Every decision feels like it needs proof, validation, or certainty before it can be made. But life doesn't work that way. Many decisions require a leap, a willingness to act without knowing everything. For someone who overthinks, that leap feels terrifying. It feels like stepping into the unknown without protection. Emotionally, overthinking is draining. It keeps the mind active even when the body is tired. It turns rest into rumination. You might lie in bed, replaying the day, imagining conversations, predicting future scenarios. Even moments that are supposed to be peaceful become filled with mental noise. This constant activity also affects how people feel about themselves. Overthinkers are often highly self-aware, but that awareness can turn inward in a harsh way. They analyze their own behavior, criticize their own responses, and question their own worth. Instead of understanding themselves with compassion, they evaluate themselves with pressure. And yet, there's something important to recognize here. Overthinking isn't a flaw, it's a misdirected strength. The same mind that overanalyzes is capable of deep insight. The same sensitivity that picks up on small details can also create strong empathy. The same desire to understand everything can lead to meaningful reflection and growth. The problem isn't the ability to think deeply, it's the inability to stop when thinking is no longer helpful. So why is it so hard to stop? Because overthinking feels like control. It feels like you're doing something, even when you're stuck. Letting go of that process can feel risky, like you're ignoring something important. But in reality, not every thought needs to be followed. Not every question needs an answer. Learning to manage overthinking isn't about forcing the mind to be silent. That rarely works. It's about changing your relationship with your thoughts. Instead of engaging with every thought, you begin to observe them. You notice when your mind starts looping, when it shifts from thinking to overthinking. One subtle but powerful shift is learning to ask a different question. Instead of, what if something goes wrong, you ask, what if I can handle it if it does? This doesn't eliminate uncertainty, but it changes how you relate to it. It moves you from fear to resilience. Another important step is accepting that discomfort is part of life. Overthinking often comes from trying to avoid discomfort, whether it's failure, rejection, or uncertainty. But avoiding discomfort doesn't remove it, it just postpones it. And often, it makes it stronger. When you allow yourself to act despite not having all the answers, something changes. You realize that most outcomes are manageable. That even if things don't go perfectly, they don't fall apart completely. This builds trust, not in the outcome, but in yourself. It's also helpful to recognize the difference between productive thinking and overthinking. Productive thinking leads to decisions, actions, or clarity. Overthinking leads to more thinking. When you notice that you're going in circles, that's your signal to pause. Sometimes, the most effective action isn't to think more, but to do something simple. Take a small step. Send the message. Make the choice. Not because you're completely sure, but because waiting for certainty is what's keeping you stuck. There's also a quiet kindness in learning to let things be incomplete. Not every conversation needs to be perfect. Not every decision needs to be optimized. Not every moment needs to be analyzed. Life isn't a puzzle to be solved, it's an experience to be lived. And perhaps the most important thing to understand is this: your mind is trying to protect you. Overthinking is not your enemy, it's a strategy your brain learned at some point. But just because it helped before doesn't mean it still serves you now. You're allowed to outgrow it. You're allowed to choose a different way of responding to your thoughts. A way that includes pauses. A way that includes action. A way that includes trust. Because beneath all the noise, there's something steady within you. A part of you that knows how to move forward, even without perfect clarity. A part of you that doesn't need to analyze every possibility to take the next step. And the more you listen to that part, the quieter the noise becomes. Not all at once. Not instantly. But gradually. Until one day, you notice something different. The thoughts are still there, but they don't control you the same way. You can let them pass without chasing them. You can make decisions without replaying them. You can experience moments without analyzing them. And in that space, something new appears. Peace, not because everything is certain, but because you no longer need it to be.